in building on rural properties, to be able to get more elbow room, a piece of land that they could have chickens. They're hot right now. Used to be horses, now it's chickens. So that kind of grew. So now we're in this flex where you still have a tremendous amount of people that want to live in the country, but the availability of land and existing acreages is very, very tight. And it's happened before this came along this year with the shortage of listings. So it's putting pressure on. People I used to draw a circle around Des Moines, 30 minutes each way. That was their perfect drive time because it gave them 30 minutes to prepare before they came to work. And then it gave them 30 minutes to uncork before they met the family. So that 30-minute drive time was good. Now I'm finding that they're willing to go out 45 minutes, some people even an hour, to find what they're looking for. So you guys have probably, maybe run onto the same types of things. I can sit here and talk forever. This is a very broad piece of real estate. It's hard to wrap your arms around it in a short period of time. But I think the biggest thing that I can do, hopefully, to help you is to kind of give you some guidance, contacts, things to look at, and people to reach out to make sort of your best friend if you're dealing with some rural properties that have questions about. As Michelle said, I'm Norm Olson. I'm going to give you my cell number if you want to jot it down, and my email address. And feel free to text me, call me, email me, whatever. If you got a question, I'll be more than happy to help you. Unless the brokers can do that, that's great. If you need further help or whatever, or questions that they're too busy or whatever, feel free to reach out to me. But my cell number is 515-401-2613. And my email address is norm@normolson.com, and Olson is OLSON. So to begin with, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't answer legal questions. So here's one of the things that you really need to find with dealing with rural properties. Find a really good attorney that understands real estate. Okay. The next thing that you will find is you want to have a good surveyor. Okay. Those two will become part of your best team that you'll have. The next part of it is each county, okay, operates a little bit differently from others. They're all good to work with. Polk County sometimes gets a bad name just because they're Polk County, but they want things done a certain way. All counties will have a little bit of fluctuation in how they want to split up land, that type of thing. So the two good places that you will use is to contact that county's planning and zoning. And then the other department would be the health department. Because in the rural area, obviously, you're going to be either dealing with rural water or wells, and you're going to be dealing with septic systems. Septic systems is a whole different animal. You can have a conversation in those alone. But there's different septic systems that are out there that should be able to fit for any property, any land that you might come across. And that's where they can help you the most. Planning and zoning, they'll probably have a list of surveyors. They won't recommend those to you, but they may have a list of surveyors for you to reach out to. You can research them on who you may want to talk to or use. And then with the health department, that's who you'll be dealing with. They'll have a list of people that do wells, septic systems, that type of thing. So each county has their own list of people that you can choose from. At one time, there was a county that only wanted to use peat systems for septics. The best system that is out there, that is the cheapest to install and to operate, is the lateral system. Okay? That goes into septic tanks, filtered through, and then it goes to laterals. And it's basically a filtration system in the ground. And basically, those have to be what they call a perk test. And a perk test is done where you take where you're going to put the septic system. And a septic system is based on the number of bedrooms. Nothing else, not square footage, but bedrooms. So that size, they would have you dig a hole 3 foot down in 4 corners and 1 in the middle. And you can do these yourself. And you pour water into it, you gauge how much that water drops each hour for the first 12 hours. If it perks and it goes down, that's a good thing, especially at a slow rate. Okay? If it doesn't go down and the water sits there, you're dealing with a lot of clay. Clay in a soil is like concrete when it gets dry, hard. It's a basin, so they're not too much forgiving for water in that sense. But the health department is there to help you. And again, they'll give you a list of names that you can choose from to use or talk to. And I recommend you to talk to at least 3 different parties, whether it's a septic system or a well, just so you get an understanding who does what, and then follow up to make sure if they got recommendations or not as far as their work and things.
Is there any certain company you like better than others? That you use as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, Rogers' septic system was, to me, one of the best. A lot of septic companies do not, and surveyors do not like to deal with Polk County. Rogers, they will. They'll go pretty much anywhere. As far as surveyors, and I apologize, I left my phone in my car, but I have a guy that is out of Warren County. He's done quite a bit of work for me. He used to do all of Warren County's work.
Just Warren County he does?
No, he'll go anywhere.
Is that something you might be able to share with us later?
Sure.
That information?
Yeah, we take a short
break.
break.
A lot of questions on surveys and who we got, and
yep.
I never have an answer for it.
Yep. And that's, I guess, what I do as I go through this. I pick and choose who I want to work with. I try to make real estate as fun as I can and take away the stress for clientele, whether they're a buyer or a seller. So I look at who performs the best, and they get calls. So I work with the ones that I feel comfortable with. This guy in Warren County in particular, he's, I shouldn't say slow because they're all slow, because it takes time.
How long does it take by the time you order someone?
It can vary depending on the size of property.
That's probably cost too, same way size of property matters.
Yeah, pretty much. If you're just,
it's the average cost.
It's a couple different ways of how they will charge you. Like I just did a piece in over in Mingo, Jasper County, and split off 3 acres, got an attorney involved, had a surveyor from Jasper County, never worked there. That guy was good to work with. We worked for a company. But, we started this in I think the purchase was like end of January, February got really ugly with weather-wise, and they never got out there until March, to be able to actually, because when they do surveys and they place pin marks, especially if it's a new plat or a new parcel that they're going to be surveying, they put pin placements at the boundary marker. And so, when it's froze, you can't drive on it very well. So
Right.
they like that ground to be, somewhat.
What would be the average cost? So,
For that particular 3-acre piece, and it was barren land, and it had to be split off of another parcel that was 15 acres total. I think that was around $1,500.
And the Jasper County guy, did you get a hold of him for the county to do that recommendation?
I actually talked with an agent over there, and then I did reach out to the county, and
They gave you a number, got it?
yeah, and the same. And I was happy with them. I'd work with them again. They were very easy to work with. The thing with that is, see, you might say, geez, that's a lot of money for $1,500. But this was something that had to be a new abstract created. So he not only went out, and I don't know if you guys have ever experienced watching a surveyor, but I was with the owner, and we saw this guy down in a truck. I mean, he was a half mile away from this. I'm going, what's that guy doing? So we went down, and I asked him, I said, are you so-and-so? And he said, yep, I'm just getting the placements of the whole track. Because what they do is they go out further, like on a road, and get placements where that pin is, or sections, because you're breaking land down, okay? And so there's a lot more to it than just going out, placing 4 spots, and you're good. They go through a tremendous amount of calculations there to get it right. But on top of that, they will take that and get it to the county and approved for you and the seller, so you don't have to deal with the county. And that, again, is the best way to do it. Like I mentioned, a good real estate attorney and a good surveyor are
Are they the ones that
best.
like the new legal description and for the new plats?
Yep.
Survey.
Yep, they'll parcel everything for you, give you that parcel number, and then from there you can build your abstract once it's recorded. So a good real estate lawyer, a good surveyor, planning and zoning for each county, and the health for each county. Those will be 4 of your team members, so to speak, if you're dealing with rural properties that you'll want to use and go to make it easier for you and easier for the seller, and at the end, get the job done correctly. As I mentioned, each county is different. Not that they're not easy to get along with, it's just that they've got different ways of doing things, okay? Polk County is challenging. I split off parcels over by Runnels. It was about a 71-acre parcel. We split it off into one parcel that had existing buildings and a house. Then we split off another section that the farmer wanted 50 acres to use as farm ground. But then I talked to him and I said, well, you've got the road frontage. Why don't we do this? Since you're buying that parcel, let's go to the county, split these pieces in the front into 2 3-acre parcels and sell them as lots. Everything that the county looks at whenever you split land is based off of road frontage. And that's how they calculate it. Okay? You have to have a certain amount of footage to be able to parcel off for each lot. Now, there are variances or ways around that. I think maybe there's something that came up about legality wise, you can't use variances anymore or whatever, but you can get around it. You just gotta go and be persistent.
It's on the highway more or less, right? Because they don't want entrances, too many entrances.
Exactly. You gotta have site
If you're on a
visibility.
gravel road or some side road, it's not as,
It's not as bad.
not as.
But the biggest thing is site visibility. You know, you don't want a driveway right there coming up over a knoll when somebody might be going 60 miles an hour and you're pulling out. So they look for your safety, you know, at that point in time too.
Do they allow, you see a lot of them may have like a one driveway that's existing and then maybe a frontage
Split
road.
off. Yep.
Some kind of frontage road across it and then get separate.
Mhm.
That would be maybe.
And that would be like an easement area.
Yeah.
So there you kind of get into shared, maybe road, might be fees to where you've got like an HOA, because you gotta pay in so much for snow removal or road maintenance or those types of things. I like the ones where you pull in and you use one driveway for two parcels possibly. You get in more, the more people you get involved, the more complex sometimes things can be. So.
I was gonna ask you about the clay. When you do run into clay, what kind of system are they recommending you put in at that point?
Clay usually will require a sand filtered system, which is the most expensive. There again, it will be based on the number of bedrooms, okay? But a sand filtered system can run probably minimum 20,000. And then it has to be monitored and read by someone who is certified to be able to come out and read that once a year, and it costs you about $500 a year.
Heat mark systems I've seen in like next to Class A water sources, they have like a UV light or something like that.
Yeah, the peat systems, I think, are kind of fading away a little bit. Yeah. I'm seeing, I mean, there's a lot of systems out there, they're changing all the time. I'm not even up to date on all of them because I've seen some systems, I'm going, wait, I mean, this looks pretty sophisticated, you know? And but I talked to one septic guy, and because I looked at relocating mine and I had concern of it, and he just told me, he said, Norm, he said, there's a system out there to fit any property that you might have. So it's a matter, again, working with that health department to find the right septic guy and make sure, and of course, those guys that are on their list, they will be already approved by the state, county, and the DNR. And that's what you want to make sure of. Just don't get some, you know, guy down the street that says, well, yeah, I put it in, and goes to Menards and buys all the stuff and puts it in, and you got to tear it down. There's guys out there that will do that. This has got to be inspected and certified and registered with the state, approved by the DNR, and that all changed back in about 07, 08, where actually it was a good thing and a bad thing. They opened up Pandora's box because you had septic systems that basically it all went into a 50-gallon drum and it leached out into the road ditches. That was the septic systems. And I've seen them. So what they were trying to do is clean up basically the environment somewhat. So this became a problem. And it was a major problem because when you went to sell a property, well, the seller didn't want to pay for it, buyer didn't want to pay for it, and sometimes you had deals that never came together because of it. Well, then the state stepped in, they required the requirements that are in place now, that it has to be inspected, it has to be brought up to code, approved by the DNR, and it's the seller's responsibility to do that. That really eased a lot of things in selling rural properties, because now we knew who was in charge of being able to do that, and it didn't fall upon the buyer. Because the lender wasn't going to pay for it. They didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't want to touch it. So it really cleaned it up, leveled the playing field, and made deals come together much easier. So, go ahead.
I have a question about covenants. So,
Yep.
Is there some areas that if you sell and split it off into like 1 or 2 acre lots, you have to put covenants in place?
No.
Okay.
No.
So that would just be a choice if the seller wanted to.
That would be
split
the
it.
choice of the seller.
Okay.
With that, and I'll wrap up here because I think we'll learn more. How many in here, let's put it this way, do not have questions or concerns? Raise your hand. That's easier. So pretty much everybody else has a question or concern or wants an answer, that type of thing. So we can go on for quite some time, but I want to try to give you an overall of certain things. Like I said, we could do this again and probably cover a whole lot more that we're not going to cover today. I don't mean to be quick and stop me if you got questions, but we covered the 4 players that can be involved, okay? In splitting land, and we'll get to those covenants and restrictions. If you split land, and most counties want 3 acres or more. Why? I don't know, but they do. If you're 10 acres or more in the state of Iowa, you can be a legal farm. And then you say, well, what's important about that? Well, what's important about that is taxes and how you are zoned. Because 10 acres or more, you can be zoned ag, provided, it used to be, and you can clarify this though, to produce $1,000 a year of income from that land. Okay? And it's a whole different world on property taxes when you're zoned ag versus residential, rural residential, that type of thing. I ran into one, I'll give you an example. And so you can help your clients with this, because I did for my client. He was from Kansas. I found him a farm in Indianola. He loved it. I said, John, you gotta buy it. Boom, he did. Got a great deal on it. What they had done, for whatever reason, they had split the property into 2 parcels. One with a house and a couple acres in the building on it, and then the rest in land. So I looked at his tax assessment. His parcel for his acreage was taxed residential. The other was ag. I said, John, that's not right. I mean, they shouldn't be doing that because you are the same owner. And I said, I would go in and fight them on this because what they're trying to do is increase their tax basis on the house, knowing that it is a farm, and charge you more taxes than what you should be paying. And I said, don't call them. And here's the thing, and you can share this with your clients as well. I did even my son-in-law. Norwalk. Great town. Here's the thing. It's so easy to pick up the phone and call them, but the other person at the other end of the phone, you'd think is a 10,000-pound gorilla. Meanest, baddest person in the world. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. Don't do that. Tell them to go in and see them face to face. Now, I know we had the situation with COVID. We couldn't do that. But go in and see them face to face. Whole different ballgame. They don't want to see you walk through that door. Because they're going, oh man, what do they want? And I'll tell you what, it's like putty in your hands. You can mold them and shape them and make it work. So don't use the easy way out when you need something tough to get done. Go in and talk to them one-on-one, and you'll get much, much better response. Just until. So that's about the 10 acres.
Norm, I do have a question on that.
Yeah,
Does it matter what the income is from?
no, just as long as it's from that 10 acres. You could have heifers out there.
Has to be a crop.
No, just farming.
Well,
You can have heifers out there if you want.
okay,
You could have a chicken farm.
okay.
Like pumpkin.
Yeah, as long as you're producing $1,000 of agricultural products, that's all you need. Certified as.
So it's not just leasing it out to hunters,
That one's got it. That's more recreational.
right?
Is CPR different too?
Uh,
Sorry.
yeah, it's, yeah, CRP. Usually, I guess that's a good question. I would have to say it would probably be zoned to ag in original, because usually it's in larger acres when people start going with CRP type thing. But it would be a good question, for the county, just to make sure. Here again, each county is different. And for example, Polk County doesn't really, when you want to split off a piece of land, they really don't want you to be over 10 acres. Why? Because you could be a legal farmer. They want to tax you. So they want you preferably to be 8 acres or less. You go to Dallas County, and when they split off land, they want you to have more than 10 acres. The counties that seem to be the easiest to work with are Madison, Warren, and Jasper. You can go in and talk to those guys. They understand it. They're kind of down to earth. Don't make you jump through a bunch of hoops and hurdles, and you get quicker results. I mentioned that parcel that I split up in Runnels. Should have been done in 60 days, 90 days. We started that process in August and didn't complete it until about the middle of January. But it was Polk County. They had to have it done a certain way. Got it done correctly. It's just more hoops to get through. So, things you got to watch for are rural water, utilities. How far away are they? Those guys aren't cheap. As far as getting electricity to you, rural water to you. So it's those types of things. Each county will have a distance of, say, you're 2 miles away from the nearest rural water hookup. Then you're probably going to be allowed to put in a well. Okay. So that will vary county to county as well. So you want to make sure you're close to and have a rough idea of the cost before you sell a piece of property to somebody and tell them, oh yeah, you can build here. Well, you can, but do you have electricity and do you have water? So kind of keep those two.
Is there a general cutoff on distance that it generally, if you're outside of a certain circle, that you can pretty much assume you're too far away?
Yeah, and again, it varies with each county. It's been a little while since I've done that, or really had to run into it. Rural water is pretty available. Electricity and those types of things are as well, but you can get into places where it gets out there.
I had a piece of land and there's no electricity on it, so I had an American come out and, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but like 11 grand just to put electric stuff on the property. But they're gonna rebate 6 of it if you build a structure within, maybe it's a year or 3 years or something like that. They allow that back to you. Don't build anything, then you're just like, Right.
Yeah.
And it was just across the street. It wasn't like they were piping it in from, there's houses around us. So it wasn't like they were bringing it 200 yards or anything
Right.
like that. Whereas it was, they had to set up their own pole though, like electric pole.
Yeah.
And they bring it in on a box, they stub it with a meter, and then the electrician can take it down, ditch it down wherever it needs to.
And Matt's right. The utility companies are pretty good about rebating stuff. Even that 3-acre parcel I split off over there in Jasper County in Mingo, it was with Alliant Energy, great to work with. And basically, the people that bought the 3-acre parcel didn't have to run it that far. But at the end of the day, they would probably receive back on rebates everything they had into it, running it from the pole to where they were gonna build in 3 years. So you gotta check that out with those utility companies on the rebates, because they're pretty gracious. You're gonna use their, juice. So you're an extra customer. So they'll help you try to get hooked up with them.
You have wells that are already on property, so like a farmhouse or something.
I have water myself.
Are they tested with the transitions and?
Yeah, and
Wells
that's,
don't come out too well as far as like drinking water, right?
yeah. There's guidelines there for the wells. Yeah, that's a whole different animal in itself again. I did it myself. I've got a well on my property. So they shock a well. Does anyone know what a shock in a well is?
It's like shocking the pool.
Well, basically, it's killing bacteria. So the way they basically shock a well is by using bleach, and you pour bleach into the well, and then run it through the lines until you don't smell any more bleach, and that's supposed to cleanse it. Well, it can, but it still needs to be tested, okay? And there's different places that, again, the health department can help you with for each county on where there may be 3 people that they work with on getting well tests done. I believe there's one up there at Iowa State. I've used one in Newton recently that's good. So there's different companies out there that you can get the wells tested.
Is your well brand new on your property or is it already there?
It was already there.
So in the event that that's the only source of water and it's not safe for drinking, still get it from there on out or what?
Yeah.
Are there certain areas where you have problems getting utilities?
It's not so much getting there, it's the cost. So that's the thing.
So did you say you could get
Yeah.
anywhere?
Pardon?
You could get anywhere if you got the funds, like so to speak?
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I've run into some that, man, it's as expensive as putting up a small building.
Is there a situation where they would make their own electricity, being remote enough,
Possibly.
like windmill or solar or something?
I haven't really run into that, but I mean, there's a lot of.
Have you dealt with
options.
solar?
I have not. I've been looking into it because I'm working on, where I live now, working on putting in equine center for horses. And so my back 36 acres only has creeks and springs and stuff like that, and no real close distance for electricity. So I'm researching that now. I'm using the solar to get away from electric. And
You should document your journey.
Pardon?
You should document your journey.
Yeah.
I feel like
Should have done that from day one, right?
this is probably a loaded question, but
Yeah.
is there any idea of how much average it takes to get utilities in certain areas?
No, it all varies a little bit. Because in the rural area, you deal with a lot of different terrain. You got deep woods, you got gullies, you got all sorts of things that it might be from point A to point B, and it might look easy, but it's not. So they kind of factor that in on their cost.
I was gonna say, I live in rural Madison County, and one of the things that I always advise my clients on that we have ran into, and I don't know if you're running into it in other counties, before people build, is internet. So we're having an issue out in Madison County with not being able to get internet in a lot of areas that are rural. There's a lot of people coming out there to build that have built, and then they are working from home and they can't get internet because there's only certain areas that they've run fiber optics to out there.
Right.
And then like the satellite internet just doesn't pull enough power if you're working from home. Have you ran into that in other counties?
I have, I've always been on, dish satellite, there's different satellite companies out there, some better than others, some that don't service certain areas, but I have always used Viasat, and I've lived out in Madison County prior to living by Pleasant Hill and Altoona. I'm in the county, I'm not part of Pleasant Hill or Altoona, so I didn't have MediaCom. They're only a block away, but they wouldn't bring it to me. So I still had to use Viasat, and that's what I went with. They're fast, very, very good internet service, very little downtime. I mean, it's quick. If I'm down, it's.
Do you know how many gigs it was? Because I think the issue that people are running into where we are is with all the kids home, you have all these, 15 to 20 devices pulling Wi-Fi for Netflix or gaming. Yep. Parents are trying to work and the satellite's just not keeping up or they're capping them.
It's just kind of like anything it depends on the company, but there again, it's money on how much you want to spend. So you can get a better, speed if you want to pay for it. Because like with Viasat, they have like 5 different levels, I believe. And being in real estate, I want something quick, as quick as possible, and they've done that. They've been the company I've dealt with for the past 10 years. There's others out there, but I've heard horror stories, so I don't know that.
What do they charge for?
I think right now what I'm being charged is $120 a month.
For how many gigs?
And I don't know. I'm not a computer person, but it's fast and it's unlimited for me. But it's just me and my wife, so it's not like I have a house full of kids or anything like that too. We did talk about driveways. Biggest thing, if you're parceling off a piece, the county's requirement is going to be site visibility just for safety. Those types of things that they're going to look for. There's a lot of different things that you have to watch for in the rural area you're dealing with that you don't have to in town. And that was the covenants, the restrictions, easements, ingress, egress, because you may have to cross over someone else's property to get to your house. Those are very important to make sure that those are in place and part of the abstract and it's recorded and so on. I've had guys threaten with guns that you cross my land, even though there's an easement or an ingress, egress, and that type of thing. So you got to be very, very careful there when you're dealing with ingress and egress to allow your client to go from point A to home, crossing somebody else's land, but that has been established, okay? Now that person might not have owned that property, but he inherited that ingress egress ruling, okay? So he has to abide by it, okay? He can't shut your client out, so to speak. I've run into it myself. I'm not a violent person, but I told one guy, I said, listen, either you open that road or I'll have a bulldozer open it for me. You don't like to get to that point, but you legally, you can. They can't block it, prohibit you, that type of thing. But you have to be careful about those. Make sure that you get clarification of what you're dealing with. I ran into an instance one time, and actually it was on my own land. The right-of-way was already established there when the parcels were there. And it was to run utilities. And the road width was there, the easement areas were there. But Mid-American Energy had the problem that they would not run the electricity across the neighbor's portion, even though that was in place, because they wanted a sign off from that neighbor allowing them to do this. So there again, you gotta make sure that everything's in place. If you, let's just say you've got 6 parcels, okay? First 4, and it's one road going back, and the first 4 are sold. And your client buys the last 2. And they want to run electricity back there or water back there. You need to make sure that those easements are already signed off on for the electric company, the water company, by all neighbors allowing you to do this. Otherwise, your client owns land. That's going to take him challenge to get through that. He can get through it, but it's going to take time and create stress.
Who would you check with on that? The assessor's office? Or-
Well, it should be part of the abstract. But what I would recommend is whoever is servicing that rural water area and the utilities, I would make sure that those easements are already in place with them, okay? That they can go back and service those 2 lots.
If you're, let's say you're doing the same scenario and you're helping, say, a developer sell all 4 lots.
Yeah.
At the time that you sell the 1, the 2, going back, is that
Yeah.
something you would have that client sign at that point?
I would have them sign everything and anything.
That's the utility.
To
And that,
be
does
able-
that come from the utility companies themselves to provide the paperwork for?
Yeah. Especially Mid-American.
And those are recorded in the abstract as well? You send those to the abstractor?
Yes. I have found Mid-American, again, can be like Polk County. They got certain rules and regulations that they go by. And they're much stricter than Alliant Energy. You've got Clark Energy to the south. I've dealt with them somewhat, but they're a lot different than Mid-American. But I would have all of that in place if you were to start a development. Make sure that all easements are in place, ingress, egress, and with all utilities signed off for the rural water, what electric company is servicing them, internet, you name it. Anyone that's servicing that area, I'd have all those easements signed off so that when somebody wants to build back there, this is in place, it's recorded.
So are you saying that Mid-America might be stricter because they've got sued more times to make sure those are already in place?
Probably.
Whereas Clark would say, well, that's your worry, so I'm not gonna necessarily require.
Well, a lot of times you're dealing with different territories.
Right.
You know, you break Highway 92 to the south, life gets a lot easier and, more laid back. You get closer to Polk County and it will change.
Do you run into any problems with inherited land and deed restrictions not being understood when it's inherited? Like maybe they don't know, like on how a property can be used and not actually be parceled off or whatnot.
Well, that goes back into, wills and that type of thing, but unless there's something in there that they want to make this a natural forest, whatever, forest preserve, that type of thing, you could pretty much do anything from my understanding. But there again, get your buddy on your team, your real estate attorney, and that's what they're good at, figuring out for you.
Can a landowner ultimately deny you those easements?
Well, no. I mean, if they're in place, no.
No, they're,
Are you saying beforehand or something?
well, let's say, like, for example, and I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that you can't block someone access to a landlocked piece.
No, you cannot sell land in Iowa that would be landlocked. So it has to have an easement, ingress, egress in place before that land can be sold off. So let's say that a farmer owns a 40-acre piece. And now he realizes that land values are high and he wants to sell the back 20 and let somebody build there. But there's no road to go there. Okay. So he sells the land to that party. They buy it. He's got the money and great. And then the guy goes, well, how are you going to get there? See, you can't do that. You got to have that road established, and the attorneys will pick up on that, or they should, that there's always got to be that ingress, egress to get to that property one way or another.
It's kind of like a necessary easement of some sort.
You can't sell land and landlock it. That's illegal in Iowa, from my understanding, but you can confirm that with an attorney. But
I want to assume as well that, if you have property across somebody's lands for water.
Yeah.
And electric.
Yeah.
Then how could they deny you that?
well, there again, I think it's a legality question, which I don't really want to answer. I can give you my opinion. If an easement or those types of things haven't been established, then they probably could.
They do not have to do that?
I don't think so. If they, see, these easements and so forth are there for a purpose. They're designed to allow for utilities, people to build, et cetera. But there have been in the past years right-of-ways. So I give you a right-of-way to cross my land to get to your land. But if there's no other easement type of situation in place for utilities to be run, well, they gave that right-of-way to not build, but to go back there and put up a camper and hunt, or just get away. So there again, that's where you hook up with a good real estate attorney to make sure that those things are in place for you. You don't come across it very often, but you do. Like going to a real estate attorney, they can pull that up and figure out, yes, there are easements there. You're good for water, you're good for electricity, those types of things. It's kind of like the septic deals. They've cleaned a lot of that up, or tried to over the years, to be able to make sure that if somebody buys a piece of land way back, that they're always going to have access to that land, and that they'll be able to have utilities and water run to that land as well.
Let's say someday they build a road on the opposite, like say that it's always been a short kind of easement to get across this person's land there.
Yep.
Then they build a road a half a mile away, and that person now argues that you don't need to use my land anymore because you can get access to that road. Can they force their easement away and make them go to that road? If it's up, like say their land goes all the way back to the new road, the other people.
Yeah.
Or the dominant property. Their land goes all the way back to the other road. Can they say, hey, you don't need to use my land anymore?
Once that is there,
They can't like petition.
that it's part of the abstract, it's there, from my understanding. Yes.
With wells, it might be different, because my neighbors had a easement to a well that was on my property, two wells together. And they got city water. And they filled in their well with sand, so they no longer had access to my property anymore.
So utilities might be a tad different.
So,
Yeah, I mean, those types of things can be done. It depends on how it's constructed. I've seen it where some septic systems are not on the property that the home is on. And it's actually on somebody else's land. And so
I have that.
that you do,
I have a commercial property that has 4 different sets of everything from.
really,
It was all part of one plat.
Yeah.
Now there's 4 different like things there, but all their septic are on my commercial.
so do you have any kind of agreement where if that septic system fails, they gotta move it back to their own property?
No, I don't know that they would even have to do that. That's why it's, hopefully they bring the city utilities up, and then at that point, once it fails, you won't be able to fix it. You'll have to look up the
So
city.
they're close enough to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
able to
right now,
hook the city?
yeah, right now, that's not an option.
But do you have that in there that says that they have to hook up to the city?
No, I think the city would do that when I first started real estate, years ago, you'd be surprised, but on 63rd Street here.
Yeah.
Some of them are on septic.
Hmm.
And even back then, and that was a long time ago, they'd allow you to fix the laterals, but they would not allow you to make any repairs to the tank because city utilities were in play. So once the tank failed, you had to hook up to the city. And they'll generally allow you to spread that cost out over your tax base a lot of times. So let's say it costs $12,000 to hook up your city utilities. They'll spread that over your real estate taxes over 10 years. So you're not just hit with this huge bill. They make it somewhat light with your, which would be considered a special assessment. So if you go to sell the property, that new buyer's going to want you to pay that in full.
There has been, and probably still is, quite a few septic systems in Johnston.
Yeah. Your unincorporated parts that you think, oh, this is just part of Des Moines, but at one point it was unincorporated. Center Township, Rockford Township, those are all on septic out there.
Ours is like that, right by John Deere.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of town now, but when
Right.
it was developed, it was on the outskirts and.
Right.
We're all private sealers.
So, yeah, my septic tank, for my commercial, we would share with the restaurant, just a distribution box.
Oh, okay.
So if we ever put in a new system, which is needed actually right now,
Yeah.
they'll cut them off and they'll have to do their own thing.
Do there, yeah.
Which will still, not may not.
Which most try to do, yeah, and they're better off anyway. Their value goes up. Yeah, city right there, so.
Is this all stuff you would research for that due diligence period on the purchase agreement, the land purchase agreement?
Well, yes, I mean, depending on what you're buying. If you're getting into,
Like land to build on?
pardon?
Like if you're buying land to build on?
Yeah, you would want to have a due diligence, just build in outs for your client and yourself, so that if you go to get into some of this and you find out like, wow, the electric's gonna cost me $30,000 to get there, those types of things.
What's the standard amount of time on that? Because like on a, so resale house, you usually put 10 days for your inspection.
Mhm.
What would you put on
60, usually you can get everything done in 60 days.
60 days? Okay.
It's just like anything, you're dealing with. Sometimes people will work faster than others to get you Olson electric or water, but they're busy, and so how they can work you into their scheduling and so forth. But I like to try to have more time than less time.
Okay. So if you received a purchase agreement that says 60 days, that'd be fairly normal.
To me, it would be.
Okay.
Especially if it's just land that you're gonna be building on. So there again, the seller can always, carry the option that it will remain on the market to take backup offers, while this due diligence process is playing out.
Okay.
Propane tanks. see a lot of people selling propane and then the seller wants credit back for how much propane's still left in there. I think we're informed for that, but I think a lot of us forget that.
Yep.
And then at the end of the closing, all of a sudden, the seller's looking for a check.
Right.
You didn't set the table on that, right?
Yeah, and so Matt brings up a good point. That can be kind of a, cold fuzzy, so to speak, at the end of the deal, where if you're not on the same page dealing with LP, LP is a moving product, so it can be sucked out by the company, okay, and credited back to you. I've run into situations both where a lot of times LP tanks will be leased. The lease isn't very much, $30 a year. To me, that's kind of cheap because of the fact that if that regulator goes out in January and it's 30 below, you don't have to fix it. You just call them to come and fix it. So it's not a bad way to go. They maintain the tank and keep it flushes and so on. But if you ever fall into that situation where you're representing the buyer and there is a squabble, one way to resolve it is just tell the seller, just have the gas distracted, credited back to you, and we'll go with a different company. The other way to explain it to, and here's the thing about LP, and glad you brought that up. LP is contracted, okay? And there's a lot of different companies out there. And so you want to try and pick 2 or 3 of the top ones in your area and then get a cost per gallon on what they charge so you can get good pricing. But the best time to contract that is in the summertime. Reason being is you don't consume a lot of LP in the summertime because one, not heating the home, might have a gas burner or gas stove, but that's it. And farmers haven't kicked in to be able to buy LP to dry corn and soybeans. And that, they take a large portion of that in the fall once harvest starts. So the prime time to be able to contract that is in the summertime to get your best pricing. The other thing that you can explain to your buyers, if this happens to slip through the cracks, so to speak, is that, okay, you can have the seller, have the company come out, take the gas out, move the tank out, and bring somebody else in. That's kind of a hassle, For the little amount that's usually in there, which is a few $100, just pay it. You got to buy the gas anyway. So if you brought in another company, they got to disconnect everything, anything that's gas oriented in the house. They got to relight pilot lights, so on. So it kind of becomes a complicated deal that way. I just explained it to them that,
I was thinking one time, I might be wrong on this, but they had a copper one. It was that gas starts to heat those fittings and stuff.
Right.
So that was no. You see anything like that where it was?
Not so much anymore because they,
Changed out.
Yeah. And those guys, the plumbers.
Buried versus unburied, that's just more of a preference.
You want it buried.
You want it buried.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, you mean the tank?
Yeah, the tank.
Oh, the tank, no. You see different developments and they bury their LP tanks and stuff. I guess it's because it looks, but I kind of look at it like, really, you could just put shrubs around it and, dial it up that way. I don't like burying tanks because, you got that in the ground and then it's a cost to get it out.
Right.
If you want to change companies, if you own it, I guess that's one thing. But anything that's buried eventually will erode. So it just, to me, it's better to have it on the upper surface so that you can work on a regulator or a line or whatever it might be. So I prefer LP tanks above and visible, easier to get to, easier, maintain, that type of thing. If you got those developments and they are buried, I guess you'd live with it if you want that certain home. But I prefer above ground. So, what other questions, anybody?
Norm, I think the one thing that's been kind of a headache for me is cash crop.
Cash crop.
And assure that that's all taken care of. That
Yep.
knowing when they can actually build or not build, or when that crop, how much time that farmer actually has to get his crop out.
Right.
Sort of.
Yep. Yeah, that can be a tricky situation where you're buying a piece of land and gonna build and it's in crops, Farmers are slaves to the weather, so to speak, because you just don't know if it's gonna be raining or what the weather will be like and when they can get it out. That's a little bit tricky. You can always put in a deadline, so to speak. Most crops are out by November 1st. Usually it's still good enough to be able to put in foundations and basements in our area, that type of thing. But that gets a little tricky as far as.
Isn't there a deadline though that the seller has to let that renter know that he's
Yes.
selling the house? So basically, he has a certain amount of time legally, does he not?
That's only for renewal, okay? And I was gonna bring that up because I think Matt might have mentioned on a sheet about talking about farmland, which is a different kind of animal, so to speak. But to answer your question on that first, farmers, if you have land out there and it's being rented for soybeans, corn, hay, whatever it might be, you have to give that person written notification by September 1 of, let's say, 2021, that they will no longer be renting the land to produce crops for the 2022 season. Okay, so you got to give them a written notice that they receive by September 1 of the year.
Anything after that has to be the following year, that they get the following year.
They get the following year.
And
Correct.
you want to make sure that you get it notarized.
Not so much, you can send it certified.
For certified or
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah, just so that you've got record of it.
I had a seller that actually was notified, sent a letter,
Mhm.
but did not have any
Follow up.
right.
Yeah.
And that farmer was very happy.
Yeah, some of them can because they don't want to give up that land.
You see something more like they're farming 40-acre parcel, and I'm just gonna use 5 acres for a house, so we're just gonna adjust what you're farming now, right?
Mhm.
We're taking 5 acres out of the equation.
Yeah.
Does that still have to be delivered by September 1st, that change?
You gotta, yeah,
Okay.
you gotta notify them. Because what farmers do is they contract things out for the next year, whether it be fertilizer, corn, soybeans, that type of thing. So they're making plans, they have to, for the next and upcoming year. And so that's why they felt that September 1 was the appropriate time to notify farmers so that they no longer have this land or a portion of this land or that type of thing.
Do those leases have to be filed anywhere, or is it just, could it be just between the landowner and the farmer?
You can have them recorded, but
They don't have to.
it doesn't have to.
That's even if it's not.
Pardon?
Anything, that's even if it's not anything in writing.
Yeah.
Even if it's just
Well,
verbal.
wouldn't it need to be in writing? I mean, if I'm a farmer and I plan to farm that 40 acres, next year, I would want something in writing saying I get to do that by September 1st. So isn't it kind of on both of them?
No, not so much. For the farmer, they're like hoping they forget about September 1, so it falls in and they automatically have rights
So
to.
the guy can just assume and he's got legal standing? Wouldn't that be like an oral contract when they say it isn't worth the paper it isn't written on?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it could be, yeah.
I would think they have, if I didn't renew your contract, then there's no contract.
Yeah, and that's where, I guess, from what I've been always told, it's a written notice by September 1 and proof that they've received this, that they no longer have the land to farm.
The other thing on that is if you're signing a lease, you do not want to sign the cancellation the same day. I don't remember exactly why that is, but they want a gap between the two.
Yeah.
So you can't do it all in one fell swoop.
Yeah. And then, I don't know if any of you deal with, sometimes you come across farmland and listing farmland. Farmland is valued for crop-wise and recreational-wise. Farm-wise, they go by what they call corn suitability rating, CSR. So the higher the number on the corn suitability, the more expensive it is per rent per acre and value per acre. So you can get into that. ISU's got a great website that you can go into and find out more information on the corn suitability rating. But all it is a gauge of the level and quality of the soil. The higher the number, the better the soil, and on down. So you got top grade corn and soybean ground, and then you get into the 40s and 50s where it might be more hay ground. And rents fluctuate from that corn suitability rating. Also, the price per acre. A lot of farmland is selling at auction.
Is that a prescription the farmer should have?
What's that? Oh, for
Yield
you can pull it up. You can pull it up on the assessor's.
Okay.
Because it'll give you the different types of soils, and then give you the CSR levels as well.
How do they know?
Just by recording through the ag department. Because a lot of farmers do soil samples on their own land to see what kind of fertilizer they need, how much, so on. And it's a crazy thing. Some portions of one huge field might need more than others, you know. So they'll do random soil testing just to see what the need is for fertilizer. So, you deal with appraisers all the time when you're selling homes. Well, it doesn't go away in the rural community either. It gets tougher. So you have to deal with those appraisers. So you sell a property and it doesn't appraise. You've got to try to figure out a way to help the appraiser get there. On rural properties, they have a certain limit that they say that they can go out and try and find comparables. But sometimes that's tough to do. Some will say, well, 5 miles, you know, for a house, what, 3 blocks, 2 blocks, either direction. The thing with acreages, there's usually no 2 acreages the same. I mean, they're all different. I'm sure you probably have seen them. You got a great house, no outbuildings. The next one is vice versa. So you have to try to figure out different ways of how you're going to be able to help that appraiser out to get there. Sometimes it can be just land, and I've helped out some of the lenders that I work with, and they got in-house appraisers. So you get into the hinterland, so to speak, Mingo, I'm picking up Mingo. It's kind of out there. And so you sell 3 acres. And we listed it at 100,000, got 90,000. That's 30,000 an acre. Lenders go, well, I gotta pay that. Farm ground's running 6,000 an acre in that area. Well, we're not selling it as farm ground. We're selling it as a building site. And it leads me into other things that we'll get to where you gotta find the right lender for those properties. But with that case, I was kind of prepared because you got Valeria and some of the other smaller communities out around this area where it's over 3 acres. Well, we had rural water there. There was electric there. You're gonna be on a septic system. But one of your easiest things is to go back to who's ever appraising and saying, hey, this isn't working, or the lender or whatever. And it's like, what do you mean it's not working? 5 miles away, you've got a town that's selling a 1/4 acre lot for 50,000. That's $200,000 an acre. You mean to tell me your streets and curbs are worth that difference? Then they kind of sit back and go, oh, I never thought of that. So you got to be prepared on how you're going to be able to handle that appraiser, lender, whatever it might be. What's getting popular right now is the steel buildings with the homes.
Barn dominiums.
Yeah, exactly. They're hot. They started real hot in eastern Iowa. They're kind of spreading throughout. I'll give you a tip. If you ever have someone that wants to build one, usually there are no basements. Encourage the in-floor heat. But what I always encourage people to do, we got tornadoes in Iowa, is always have a breezeway between the home and the garage. And in that breezeway area, wide enough and long enough to where you can put a little door and slip down in a little 8x8 or 6x6 room just to get in case there is bad weather, derecho, tornado, whatever. Because otherwise, you're kind of vulnerable. But with that said, those are popular. And I ran into this probably 8 years ago. Sold a property in southern Warren County. And it was that typical home. Beautiful. I mean, it was like 2,200 square feet, finished, deluxe, and then an attached garage, and then an attached shop, and the whole spiel. So the appraiser called me. He said, man, I can't get this to appraise. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, this is a barn. I said, well, no, it's not a barn because there's no animals. This is a home, got an attached garage, got a workshop attached to that. It's 2x6, studs. It's insulated. It's got in-floor heat. I said, it's got a steel roof. It's got steel siding. You never have to worry about it. Vinyl gets pops with, rocks from a lawnmower or hail or whatever else. I said, this is probably built better than some homes. So you tell me the difference between this and a home that has no basement that's on a slab. And he was real quiet for a while. He says, I'll be back to you. He called me back a couple days later and he says, you know what, you're right. This is built better than a lot of homes. So you got to do battle with those guys, but you got to be prepared, so they don't run over you and say, oh, it's
great. Nice. Be nice about it.
Oh yeah, be nice. You want to be nice. Yeah, but what you want to do is you want to be prepared so that you kind of knock them back on their heels and they go, I got to rethink about this. And then they rethink about it, and then they learn from it, so then when they go on to the next one, they got a comparable.
What lenders do you like, and what should someone be prepared to put down on their land?
Bare land, you'll have to come up with 25% down minimum.
The agricultural too, where it's cash crop.
Here's the other thing that you really have to be careful of. And this is the trick to rural properties and buying land and so on. Your big banks, they don't want anything to do with crop ground, nothing. So don't even go there. You either have to really find a good small bank, Bank Iowa, or Raccoon River, one of those banks that's really established, good relationship, and you can go and get an in-house loan. Okay. The other one that I use a lot is Farm Credit Services. I use those guys a lot. They got in-house appraisers. Those guys understand values of, you get into some of these properties, whether it be an equine center, just a nice acreage with an outbuilding, those types of things. You get some of the in-town appraisers going to the rural market, they don't have a clue. And they're not going to give you any value for that outbuilding, because to them, it is worth nothing. Just like a pool. They don't give you money, they take away money off the appraisal for a pool. So you want to hook up with the right lender. And so you got to go to a smaller town type bank that has a great relationship and you can walk in and get a deal done. Or my best avenue has been Farm Credit Services. Because like I said, they understand rural properties. All of their loans are in-house. They have their own appraisers. Some of those appraisers I've worked with in the past, they will go out and see a 60 by 120 Morton building and give you value for that. Whereas some of the other appraisers that come from the city give you a zip. So it's hooking up that part as well to make all of that work on whether you're selling an established acreage or starting new and building.
I'd say Luana's another good one.
Which one?
Luana Savings Bank.
Oh, I haven't dealt with those guys, but I've heard good things. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that their risk manager basically says farm ground is more valuable than cash to them, so
Yeah.
they can put it in the house as well.
Yeah, right.
Another one is People's.
People's, yep. So that's what I mean. You find those types of banks that will, but your Bank of America's, US, Wells, that, just don't even go there because they won't touch it.
You have a formula on these outbuildings, and so I got a question on outbuildings and gravel.
Outbuildings and what?
In gravel.
Oh, yeah.
I talked to a buddy of mine. My lot is 13 acres and it was on gravel.
Yeah.
And they paved it. I was just curious, what kind of value would that add? Property, I asked an appraiser buddy of mine, he's like, I might give you $5,000. And I said, you know what? I said, I've lived on gravel. Anyone that has lived on gravel will pay $50,000 to not live on gravel.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Yeah, if you want to drive anything other than like an 86 F-150.
Yeah.
Forget it on gravel.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. It definitely, in my opinion, properties that are on blacktop over gravel absolutely carries more value. There's some people that just absolutely will not deal with gravel because of the dust or chips. They drive a cycle, they got a Mercedes, whatever it might be. Even horse people, I mean, they can be picky on their trucks, their trailers. They're not going to touch gravel, that type of thing. So there's a huge value there. I don't know if some of you, what's that?
$500,000 property. What kind of say a $500,000 house,
Mhm.
one on gravel, one not on gravel, what kind of?
Well, I would say that, you know, you could be 25,000 more for sure. It all depends on, you know,
The amount of gravel too.
well,
Once you're on a half a mile of gravel, you might as well be on 10 miles.
well, not so. I don't know if you guys were doing a lot of this in like, oh, I think it was, I've been, when we had the monsoon rains and they were only supposed to get 500 flood once every 500 years, and I think we got 2 of them in about 3 or 4 years. Counties, just like any government, cheats on where they allocate money. Okay. Marion County and Warren kind of got caught with their pants down, so to speak. Because what happened was they cheated on surfacing their roads with the amount of gravel that should have been, didn't, and they used those funds to go elsewhere. We got hit with all those rains. In Marion County, there were people that had to park and walk to their home 3 miles away because the roads were so bad. I was down by Lake Aquabi, which is south of Indianola. I drove a 4-wheel Silverado, heavy duty, and was going in rural roads back there, and was in 4-wheel drive and almost got stuck. So that gravel issue, I've never seen so many people after that year want to get to blacktop. I mean, everybody that had a home that was on gravel, I swear to God, put it up for sale.
So what did the county owe those people?
Oh, they paid out the nose. I can't remember the millions of dollars that they had to pay out to resurface those roads and pay tribute to those people that suffered the consequences. It was ugly. I mean, they had trenches this deep in gravel roads because there was no gravel.
Had those going to my house,
Did you?
Warren County,
Oh, what part?
just southeast of Indianola.
Indianola. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, you know, they're great counties, but they, you know, they didn't see this coming, and it kind of cost them at the end. But values will always carry more with blacktop. Well, you don't have the road dust. If you are stuck on rural roads with gravel, and I've been on them before, you know, there's companies out there that will do dust control. I don't know if you're aware of those. You pay, they come and service it twice a year, and it does reduce the road dust tremendously.
Tarring down on it or something?
It's not really a tyrant. It's more of a solution, oil kind of mixture.
Yeah.
It'll kill grass, it'll kill anything
Mhm.
if it hits it, but it does a tremendous job on road dust and things like that.
How do they charge by the mile, or how do they?
By the distance and how much ever you want
Do you
to.
see a string of owners going in on that? Is that pretty much what they do?
You can, yeah, because a lot of neighbors just right on down the line if you're close, you know. There was one in particular out by Winterset that I sold to a guy, and he happened to be on the west side of the road, but on the east side, there were semis always going by, and it was quite a bit of gravel. And what the deal was, there was a seed company that did it commercially, so they had semis going, you know, all the time, and the dust was like, stop. So he was able to get the company to pay for reducing that by taking care of the roads, you know, and stuff like that. But
I think the only downfall, if you spray, is then the graders can't grade your road frontage. So whatever
Yeah.
amount you have sprayed, then the grader won't grade that, so.
right, but usually they will do that. I think they kind of try to work together because where I have been, and it's Madison County, they came through and graded prior to, and they're notified, and did the grading, and then they came with the solution. And and did it in May. And then again, they didn't touch it with a grader, but usually you're pretty good, you know, through the summer months and stuff, unless it's carrying a huge amount of traffic. Then they come back again in August and hit it with a solution again. And then that kind of carries you through, you know, October, and then you might have your grader work come out and do a little bit, but.
They're saying great first.
Pardon?
Great first.
Yeah.
Or actually what Warren County does, is for ours, is they come out and grade and they put gravel. And they'll grade that.
Yep.
And they put the solution.
Yep.
And then they'll grade again, before they come with the second solution.
Oh, they will grade the second time?
Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't get it done. But
Yeah.
I guess some of it kind of depends on what the road looks like too. But-
Right.
But a lot of times they'll come and grade.
Yeah.
If it needs.
If it needs to be. Yeah, it depends on the use, you know, because you got people that drive fast, and the faster they go, the more they flail the gravel out, you know, so that makes a difference too, on the traffic and so on, so that affects it.
What if you buy land to hunt and then find out because houses are closing in on you that you're no longer allowed? I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but I mean, does that happen where, you know, you moved out to this land and you have enough land to hunt on, but say, because there's no houses maybe outside of your property line, but now there becomes houses inside of your property line?
Well, the only
Or not your
difference-
property line, but inside of like where a bullet can fly.
Right.
And so now you're
But
told you
but
can't
if
hunt your land.
if you're not rezoned, you can hunt it. The only thing is that you have to have a certain amount of distance to be able to shoot from home. And I think that distance was 500 feet. So you can still hunt it.
That's a lot shorter than I was thinking.
Yeah. So you have to be that far a distance away to discharge.
Yeah.
You know, obviously you wouldn't shoot at the house, but
Right.
you know, away from the house type deal. You know, I'm kind of in that situation because I live on 56th Street in Pleasant Hill, so I'm in between Pleasant Hill and Altoona, kind of in town.
I'm right over there too.
Are you?
I'm just west of Brook Run.
Oh yeah, I got the lavender farm.
I probably passed all. I'm in Des Moines, but I'm right
Okay.
just west of Brook Run.
Okay. Yeah, we're close.
Yeah.
So I'm in the county, not in the city, and so I can still hunt it, you know. It's just you have to be very careful for buildings and houses and.
I always scratch my head when I go past down 56 and there's like that, you know, the ravine and the cows and all that.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, I'm just on the other side of the cow.
Okay.
The railroad track.
Yeah.
I'm on the south side of the railroad track.
Okay.
And then I started a lavender farm for my wife.
Very cool.
Yeah. So she's doing that gig, and I don't know, I got more involved in that than I thought. That's a whole different deal.
I always thought that was an interesting piece of property there, though, that had
Yeah.
so much going on.
Oh, it is. It's pretty crazy because you got the creek, 4 Mile Creek coming through there and things like that. So it's, you know, that's another different part of real estate, which that's getting very popular with people, is hunting, recreational ground, that type of thing. Actually, recreational ground at a lot of times will bring more than crop ground in that area. Crop ground, you might be able to buy for $2,500 an acre, but recreational ground will be going for $4,000 an acre. There again, it's going to be with that lender, and if you've got a relationship to be able to go in, sometimes they require more money down if it is recreational ground. But it's all in relationships with that lender. But that's another piece of real estate that has become popular. People are looking for that little getaway for the weekend where they can take a camper or whatever. And they're great. You just, same rules apply. Just make sure that you've got access to your property, whether it's just straight into the abstract or if there's an ingress, egress, making sure that that's well in place. But it's definitely a niche market. if you're uncomfortable with those types of properties and things, you can outsource it. You know, if you don't want to do it, you refer it. You can look that avenue. There's different companies, Whitetails Unlimited, Iowa Land, those types of guys. They're pretty good guys to deal with as well. That, you know, you can outsource, get a referral, and not deal with it if you feel uncomfortable. Here's the other thing that you have to be aware of, and it's with any time, is safety. Make sure you don't get caught up in a situation where you want this buyer, but you've never met them, and want to see this rural property, and especially if it's vacant. Don't be going alone if you can. Have someone go with, or if you feel uncomfortable, ask this buyer to be pre-approved, run them through your lender, names, social security numbers, you get history there, and get a little bit better comfortability factor with that person. Don't get hung out into a property, no matter how tough you think you are. Don't get hung out there where you don't know this person. You could fall into a situation where you could be harmed. You get in that hitherland and things change. Sometimes cell phones don't work. So be very careful when you deal with rural properties and who you're dealing with, and do maybe a little extra questions and answers, so to speak.
I have a couple of questions. What protections should you make sure you're putting into a PA on the buyer side, especially, I mean, we're dealing with 60 to 90 day timeframes. I mean, obviously the seller, that's a big time frame when you're selling land.
Yep.
In general anyway, but
Yep.
So I guess what protections should we be making sure we're putting in there for the buyer?
Well, like I said, I usually look at 60 days if it's more of a complicated piece, so to speak. A lot of things I can get answers on fairly quick, within 10 days to 2 weeks. But you just want to be able to make sure that water's available, utilities are available, access to the property. One thing that I always ask the sellers to do when representing a buyer is to, one, provide a survey. And you would be surprised on how many properties out there don't have a survey. I sold a property out by Reynolds, never been surveyed. I don't know how that happened. The agent, I think, was representing this guy, and she was from Cedar Rapids. And I asked for a survey, either provide one, or if one is not available, do one. Well, they tried to tell me where the boundary lines were. No, that doesn't work. So we did one, and in actuality, it went to the west, considerable footage, right up next to the neighbor, to where the neighbor had kind of like one of these garages with multiple doors. That line was right at that door. You know, so you want to make sure you protect your buyer so that they know what do they own. You need to see that survey. It needs to be recorded, and you need a copy of it. Then on top of that, if they have one, I ask them to go out and mark the corners of the boundaries visibly with like bright yellow tape or whatever. So if you're taking someone out, you can find your way and you don't get lost, and can identify where those corners may lie. So you definitely want to have those. But the basics, making sure that you talk to the county that you can build there, that it is a buildable lot, but you know, your utilities and so forth. If there's any covenants, restrictions, that type of thing. You know, covenants and restrictions, we didn't talk about that much, but take it, nobody's an attorney in here or anything.
Paul is.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. You're a good one, right? The thing is when you do go and let's say you develop a piece for someone, okay? And here's the biggest thing that people ask right off the bat. Is there any covenants or restrictions? And if there is, I move on. And it's tough, and it's gotten tougher because it's harder to find land. I bet I've had 10 people every year, if not more, looking for 3 acres, no covenants, no restrictions.
Only 10.
And that's minimum. But that's been for the past 8 years, every year, you know, and it's hard to find, you know. Thing I mention is that if you get into splitting this up, be careful on choosing the right attorney, okay? So that you don't take, depending on what you want to do with this, it's different if you want to be a gentleman's acreage, I call it, where you sit on your lawnmower and mow for the whole weekend. And I got an acreage and elbow room, but you just wasted Saturday and Sunday mowing all the time. Or if it's an acreage that favors people that what they want to do. They want to do something on their own by having chickens or a horse or 2 or this type of thing. You got to be careful so that you don't get into a situation where you get buried with covenants and restrictions and you don't come out with a good outcome, so to speak. There's more people that want animals. That's why they're moving there for the most part than not.
What are common covenants and restrictions?
Well, you know, what you get, well, there's basics, I guess, if you want to protect homeowners, okay, that you can put in and people can live with. If you want to take away, you know, any kind of campers, trailers, manufactured homes, I get it, that type of thing, because you don't want a manufactured home next to a $500,000 home, that type of thing. Junk cars, you know, sitting around that don't run. Just things that would take away from values for your neighbors. But not so much that you can't do what you want to do on your property, because that's why you're buying the 5 acres, is to do some things that you want to do. And that might be having chickens, that might be having 2 horses, and, you know, those types of things. I've fallen into some of these, and maybe you guys have too as well, where you had to build a certain house. It had to be a certain square footage. It had to be 4-car garage. It had to be this or that. You just have to decide where's your biggest market and how valuable is that land, and what do you foresee, how expensive of homes are they going to build there?
What if you bought a property to be like a pumpkin ranch or like an apple orchard or something, and you started creating commercial traffic on a road, even the gravel or not? I mean, could you have action potentially taken against you if you didn't? Like, or would you have to rezone it?
You mean, no?
Just some sort of commercial if you're having hundreds of people come in every November, or thousands of people come in?
No, because I got that going on right now.
Or lavender farm.
Yeah. No, not really, because if it's big enough in your farm, hey, you know, you can do it.
But don't you have to get approval from like planning and zoning if you're doing a commercial, something that's commercial that's to build out there? You'd have to get approval from planning and zoning to build the building, correct? If it's gonna be.
Well, if you're getting, not in the county, it's a whole different deal. If you're zoned ag, I mean, that property I sold in Runnels, okay? It was 71 acres. They went to Polk County, said, hey, we're gonna put up a building, do we need a permit, da, 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 da. And yeah, we'll help you out. They take their money, they do all this. And they're into show cattle, and I mean big time show cattle. They put up this big barn. After it's all built, county says, well, really, you didn't need a permit. You're a farm.
Thanks for the money. though.
Yeah. So you need to make sure who you're dealing with and what, they might say one thing, but, you know.
I guess one thing is like, I think, because technically they're growing a crop, if it's say pumpkin patch, just using that as an example, like
Yeah.
technically they're profiting off of their crop. And so I think that would probably be the gray area maybe.
Yeah, yes and no. I guess it's kind of like these stands that you see that sells fruit and vegetables and all that kind of stuff. And you become a seasonal type clause, so to speak. I've checked into it with Polk County on what we've got going. And we're I've already had buildings. I'm growing crops there, lavender. And we're ag related and we're producing over $1,000, a year. So they can't take anything away there, but we're seasonal. And they said, do I need any permits or licenses or anything? I said, nope, you're in the county, you're a farm, you're seasonal, no different than a stand.
Are basically all crops seasonal?
Yeah, they are. I mean, and whether it's corn or beans or,
Yeah.
that type of thing. Yeah. I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, no problem. Mine's about time of transfer, and I have a little bit of story so that you can maybe fill in the blanks. But this goes back probably 8 years. So I don't remember exactly all the details, but it was in Pleasantville. I was representing the buyer, and the seller had I think they were laterals, had it inspected, let's say October, and we didn't buy the property until February. And I think by April or May, the buyers were calling me saying, there's a problem and it's gonna cost us $7,000. So, I can't remember if it was Rogers or who it was. But, I had made sure, and granted, I don't do a lot of acreages, so I should have, sadly, the listing agent was the broker that I worked for at the time. So she wasn't a whole lot of help, but, sorry. Anyway.
So when
so what was our recourse?
So you bought it in October?
No, the seller had the septic, the time of transfer, had it inspected.
In October.
Right.
Okay.
And so then, it wasn't listed until I don't know when, and then purchase closed in February.
Yep.
Buyer starts living there.
Yep.
Starts having issues, and then, it's gonna cost them. But like I said, I can't remember all the details, it was a few years ago, but, the buyer was ticked at me, even though ahead of time, I made sure that we talked to everybody, make sure everything was done the right way, I had all the paperwork in place.
So you had the time of transfer and everything stamped?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But it was gonna cost them $7,000, and, like I said, they were upset with me, and I was,
Sometimes those things can happen. It's just like we live in Iowa and we got weather changes, concrete adjusts, block walls, etc. Trees, cold, heat, things happen. So you did everything that you needed to do. That's just the kind of mother of nature, so to speak. It's unfortunate, but it's one of those things that can happen because it is a septic system. So not much you can do about that. As long as they had the appropriate documentation because those will last 1 year. Okay, so sometimes I think 2 in certain counties. If you've had the septic system clean, checked, and okayed. So it's not your fault.
No, and I think they had heard from a neighbor or somebody that the seller, was, there was something suspicious about it. And then because the listing agent and myself were out of the same brokerage, they thought we were in on it. It was just a disaster.
wrong, but.
Yeah, but neighbors talk and they're growing, they don't have facts and,
Something could happen.
oh yeah.
How long is that time of transfer good
Minimum 1 year, usually 2 years,
for?
from the time that
That
it's
seems like
been
a lot to
cleaned
happen
and,
in that.
cleaned and, oh yeah, I mean, it can, I mean, it can with anything, you know? I mean, you can have a house inspected and look great, and it's a block basement and everything's just Jim dandy, but all of a sudden you get an influx of weather and things change. And maybe it's an older house, those block walls can give way here or there. And,
So in that situation where, we know that it's an older inspection and, we're buying it in the middle of winter, is there anything you would do differently or right in there?
not really much you can do because it's already been inspected. You can't really, what's that?
You put the original purchase agreement at the time you're making the offer, time of transfer, 5 days of closing, I mean, make that a stipulation, make that. And
Well,
it's someone isn't
sounds
gonna
like they
like to do that twice, but I mean.
Well, the reason that they did it and did it at that time is that it's very difficult to do inspections over the winter time with the cold and the freezing.
Right.
Especially if it's a lateral system, because they'll probe. And it's kind of hard to probe when there's, 12 inches of frost or that kind of thing, so.
So if they have a DNR transfer inspection done like in September of 2019, we're buying this house in May of 2021, that's still good?
It depends.
I think
You
it's-
gotta check with that health department in that county to
Okay.
see if
So it
they're,
varies from county to county,
yeah,
but at least 1 year.
at least 1 year, yeah, for sure.
What?
I was gonna say, I just always read the septic report because I've seen them let things go that really shouldn't.
If those can be found and proven,
I always ask for.
then you can go back to those people that were there to check that out. They're the ones that get hung out to dry. Because it's just like anything, they're people, they're inspectors.
Or they added 2 more bedrooms and the laterals are not long enough to
Oh, now that's a problem.
really qualify.
Yeah. Now, if they check that off, and that's a good point. Remember I said septic systems are based on bedrooms. So all of a sudden, if you had a 3-bedroom ranch, you had a lateral system that was built for 3 bedrooms. Now all of a sudden they finished the walkout basement level, added 2 bedrooms. It's recorded on the assessor's page. Now you've gone from a 3-bedroom to a 5-bedroom. That changes that size of septic. So at that point in time, that septic needs to be updated. Sure. So again, I mean, it's kind of crazy with this rule. It's a different world because there's so much more there. You're dealing with a lot of pieces versus a house in town, that type of thing. You do a sewer smoke, right? Here you go. Find boundary markers, septics, wells, easements, ingress, egress. There's a lot of moving parts. So it's always good to gather as much information. Here's the thing. The worst question is the one that never got asked. Okay? No question is stupid. So you got best company you're working for in concepts. Great leadership, people that are willing to help other people. If I can help, you got my contact info. But reach out. Don't be shy. Ask all of those questions, find out all those answers, cross the T's, dot the I's, and make sure at the end of the day, you can walk away from that transaction feeling good for your client and yourself at the same time.
Hey Norm, was there ever a situation where you'll find out maybe later in the transaction that for some reason due to restriction, they won't have mineral rights?
That they'll keep the mineral rights?
Like the buyer wouldn't get mineral rights, like if they wanted to dig for rocks and things like that they couldn't?
I haven't run into that. But you'll see a lot of that in Montana and Wyoming, Oklahoma, where a person will sell property, but they reserve mineral rights, you know, because of oil or whatever else, gold or whatever else they might
So
think.
they,
that
can they
they're
just
going
come
to
dig
get.
on your property, or what is that? Or is,
Yeah, it's,
It depends on how it's laid out legality wise, but they can, you can, even in Iowa, reserve mineral rights. If you ever were to sell land, who knows? Maybe, you know, one of these big time road construction companies want to build a new highway or whatever, and they want to use your land because make a great quarry. And at the end of the day, they take out God knows how many miles of gravel. And then at the end of the day, whoever owns the land gets a huge pond. There's a lot of quirks to the rural things, and that's why I say you really got to dig in and find out the answers to things that you get that gut feeling like, I'm not sure about this. Then make sure. Go ask the question. Call one of the brokers, reach out to someone, call me. I don't, you know. Again, your best friend is a real estate attorney for legality parts, but I'll share my experiences as best as I can. Or I'm sure the brokers will as well. Here's one other thing, and I don't mean to keep you, are you bored yet? I'll give you this one last thing. When you go to, you know, it's hard to pull comps nowadays anymore. I think it is. I mean, you got houses selling 40,000 more than asking price. So how do you do a comp? So that's the same way in the rural area. Okay, is to how do I price this? Okay. So one of the first questions I ask anymore, even in houses, how much do you want? I want to know what their expectations are. Okay. I want to get a feel for where they're going. Rural properties are a different animal. So I've had brokers call me from outside the Des Moines MLS asking, how'd you come up with this price, or how do you do this, or how do you do that? And this guy was an appraiser. And here's how I go about it. And I'm just picking a property. Let's say it's 20 acres. Okay. It's hard to wrap around and find comps for 20 acres, a house, and a couple of outbuildings, and fencing, and you name it. So what I do is I break it down into sections to price it the best that I can. And that is, I'll take the land and look at the location. And I'll value that land in comparison to other properties of land that would sell this land. Then you all have knowledge of price of a home. Price per square foot, square footage, updates, da-da-da. So I look at that. But then I look at what else is there. Okay, there's a 60 by 120 indoor arena built by Proline. Proline, probably the best outbuilding company around the area. Orton, right there. And then there's others. So I go on the quality of the building. Reason being, another tidbit, on outbuildings, there's different gauges of steel, okay? Meaning the thickness of the steel. That's the quality, okay? I look at that and what you're going to buy. You can buy any outbuilding. You can go buy an outbuilding and pay 10 grand for it up in ours. The steel comes to you and it's not even thicker than a pop can. What's the longevity on that building?
military grade.
Not much, you know. So there's a lot of little details that you have to take into account of how you're gonna price that building. So you look at that quality of that outbuilding, and Proline and Morton don't cheat on quality. And some of the others as well. But it's just like builders. You got builders that use high quality, well, you got the same thing with outbuildings. And then I might look at the other additional things that they may have to offer. You know, is there a pond included? Will an appraiser give you a value? No, but they can make it work. Fencing, this type of thing. And so I break it down into like 3-4 sections to put value on it. The land, the home, the outbuildings, any extras, to come up with that price I feel comfortable. And then I can go back to the seller and say, hey, I think your expectations are a little high, but let's do this. Let's start high, and if we don't get action, then we lower it, just like you would with a house or nowadays, and lower it. So you try to top end as much as you can for your seller, with the understanding you're going for the high end. You don't get the activity, then the market's telling us we're too high. I saw 3 years ago, 6 properties sell. And in my estimation, out of those 6 properties, they sold for $300,000 total less than they should have. Because the agent mispriced them. And I go and check these rural properties to see what's what and that type of thing. So you want to do your due diligence on that part and never shortchange your client. There's a farm over in the Madison County area that I believe got listed a couple of years ago. It was like 30+ acres with a home and an outbuilding, et cetera, for $325,000. I couldn't get my buyer there fast enough. Obviously, it sold quickly. I had the property estimated at $500,000. So there again, be careful. Do your due diligence. Do your homework. Ask questions. You know, and start high because you can always come down, but try to maximize. And like I said, rural properties are tough for appraisers, but for anyone trying to value a property, because there is so many different pieces to account for.
Don't they appraise it differently too, based on what the buyers actually use it for? It's all wooded versus no trees, or building on it versus just keeping it for, not even recreation, but.
Oh, you know, maybe they all try to get there for you. I've only had one instance on an acreage that I just absolutely could not get this appraiser there. They sold the property for, I think it was $5.25. And I mean, we busted snowdrifts to get to it. That's how value I had it in. They had it listed, I believe it was $5.25, $5.35. We busted snowdrifts through their driveway, which is about a half a mile long, to get there, look at it. I told them to write the offer because I had the value at $6.25. I couldn't get the appraiser there. I gave them, but sometimes they get stuck on it. Don't get there. So you got appraisers. I'm sure you guys probably have that experience where you going like, are you not coming up with this price? Because it's kind of like black and white, but whatever. So it's always a challenge, you know, when you get into recreational land and building type thing. Again, it's the right lender with the right appraiser. And that's why whenever I do rural properties, personally, I use Farm Credit Services. And They just understand, I think, and have those in-house appraisers. They can usually get you there. Matter of fact, that land of Mingo comes up again. I was a little nervous, because I mean, 30,000 an acre out in Mingo. I don't know if you've ever been to Mingo, you ain't missing much, but if you've ever been out there, it's out there. And I'm going, man, I'm pushing the button here. I'm 30 grand an acre. And the buyers tried to use their local bank in Monroe. And the buyer's agent called me and asked me, and I said, run away, because I knew they weren't going to go there. And so I hooked them up with Farm Credit Services and Brandon Olson. And even Brandon and I are close. And he's a great guy to work with. And I was nervous, but they sent their appraiser out, bam, good. So I just, you always sweat those appraisals, kind of, whether it's a house or anything. But it's hooking up that right lender with what you're dealing with. If you don't have that, you're going to have some challenges.
Norm, when you're showing like large acreages, are you bringing like a side-by-side out with you to ride around to look at the, especially like the timber, or are you guys putting on mud boots and walking the whole thing, or how do you show your buyers? What's the best way that you?
I personally walk them, because you can drive it, but what I try to do is, when you go to your assessor's page, do you guys use pictometry? I'm going to use pictometry. Okay. It's like a Google Earth, so it'll give you an outline of the boundary. Okay. And if there's multiple parcels in there, you want to make sure you include those as well. So you get a scope of the outline of the property. But it depends. I mean, I've got a side-by-side devoted that I can do that with. I need the exercise sometimes, so I just go ahead and hoof it anyway. But I'd like to have, if the buyers are up to it, to walk it, because this is a big investment. This is your land. I want you to know it from corner to corner to corner. Everything there is about it. The woods, ditches, possible ponds, what you could turn into recreational for hunting, four-wheeling, whatever it might be. So I like to walk it. May take a while. I always account for just a small acreage, depending on the property, 5 to 8 acres. I always schedule an hour to just cover that. And if it's bigger, more of the time. But I like to be thorough, because 9 times out of 10, you're dealing with a higher dollar amount price-wise. So I like to put in the extra effort. And I want to know, how are your fences? Where are your corners? Are they marked? Are the fences falling down and there is no corner? And then they're going, where's this thing? So you got to have an understanding. I have to have an understanding of what I'm selling, because I'm not going to go sell someone something that I don't have a good comfortability in my, seeing it for myself. But I want them to see it. Sometimes it can be long, pack a lot of water, especially if it's hot.
Thick, where you might not get to.
Well, there's some, there's some areas where it is thick and you can't. And so that Google Earth will give you, and I'll point that out to them. Some can be tough to even get to if you even had a four-wheeler, because you got ditches in there, but there's no way to cross them. But they might be great areas to build a pond and help erosion and all of that thing as well. And I like to point that out to them, so that if they do have ditches, they got creeks, whatever, you can say, hey, you could build a beautiful pond right here and help a lot of resources at the same time.
I know we're getting ready close to our time. Yeah. I wanted to thank Norm for doing this. He's been with our company, I think, since 2004, maybe.
Yeah, whenever Spearman, you came over from the Fleur office and.
And so it's a wealth of knowledge. He's been doing acreages in horse almost his entire career, if not your entire career. And also, happy birthday. You came on.
Thank you, Norm.
See what acreages have a lot of, stress.
Yes. I'm 58 and I stay 58.
Thank you, Norm.
You got any questions or I can help in any way, feel free to let me know. Okay?
Have a good one.